Because you comment on every single one. You say thanks, Mr. Laman, or nice video, Mr. Laman, or something like that.
Right as they go off.
Yep.
3 seconds.
I appreciate it a lot. So, learning targets today. Learning target today. Hey, stop picking on Mark. Stop. Students will be able to factor trinomials, which remember means we have 3 terms, in the form ax squared plus bx plus cx. So today we're going to do some review, examples, and then practice, practice, practice. Because we need lots of practice. So this form, a times x, that's kind of ax squared plus bx plus c. Remember, a, b, and c would all be numbers. So we could have something like 2x squared plus 5x plus 17. So a, b, and c just represent numbers. So no big deal there. So far, what we've done is just like what we saw. We've had x, something like x plus 3x, x squared, plus 3x plus 2, and we factored it like this, just like we did in the warm-up. And we haven't had any numbers up here with x, right? That is what we've done so far. Now today, what's going to change is that we're going to have an a value, or in other words, we're going to have a number up here with x. So when we start to factor these, we can't just write our parentheses and just start out with an x and an x. That we're going to have to put some other number up with the x's. We're going to see how that affects our factoring. So very similar to what we did last week, but we're just adding another layer to it. So when we see problems that, in the way that we would talk about these, is we would say that these problems have an a value because they have a number right in front of the x squared. So when we have these trinomials that have an a value, the first thing that we want to look to do is try to factor out the greatest common factor. If we can factor out the greatest common factor, then we might just get rid of that a value total. It doesn't happen super often, but we still want to check for that first. Mackenzie, you're not falling asleep on me, are you?
Nope.
All right, good. So, in this case, if we look at 5, 15, and 10, what would be their greatest common factor? 5. Good. So first we can just factor out 5. Then we have x squared plus 3x plus 2. And now to factor it, we would say to factor it all the way, or to fully factor it. X times x, and then it would be plus 2 plus 1. So the first thing we want to look to do is factor out the greatest common factor. Take out the greatest common factor. Now we're going to look at some examples. Just like our lesson on Thursday, today's lesson is going to be a lot of just examples. So like on this page, if you want to write down 2 of them or something like that, that's great. If you want to write down all 4, that's great as well. But the lesson will be looking at some examples. So there's not going to be terms or anything like that. If we look at this first example, letter A, we have 4x squared plus 13x plus 3. Now, we can still set up our parentheses the way that I like to start these, and if you don't like to do it the same way, that's okay. But I just like to set up my 2 sets of parentheses first. Now, even though we have a value, even though we have 4 as our a value, we still know that these 2 n numbers are going to be factors of 3. So our factors of 3 would just be 1 and 3. So it doesn't matter where we put them. Let's say we put our 3 here and our 1 over here. Now, do you think we'll be adding, subtracting? What do you think we'll be using for our operations in the middle? Addition or subtraction? Just looking at that trinomial. Yeah, I'd say it would be adding. I mean, we have a positive 3 at the end, so we know that they either both have to be adding or they both have to be negatives. Since our b value is positive 13, we know that we're probably going to be adding because that's going to take a little bit to get up to 13. Now here's kind of where the guessing and checking starts. Because we have 4x squared in front. So we know that we have an x here and an x here because that's just how our factoring works. And now we need to decide, are we going to put a 4 here and we don't write it, but a 1 here? Or are we going to go 2 and 2 to split up that 4? Are you guys following with me? How we have to do a little bit of guessing and checking to try to figure out how we would break up that 4? Okay. The way that we would guess and check, let's say we decide to go with, let's say we decide to go with 2 and 2. The way that we would check it is we would just factor it out. Now we know that 2x times 2x would give us 4x squared. 2x times 3 would give us 6x. 1 times 2x if we're foiling. 2x plus 3. So in the middle we would have an 8x. So to split that 4 up by 2 times 2 would leave us short of 13. Now, if we know it has to be a 1 and a 4, does anyone have an idea for if we would put the 1 first or the 4 first? Lucian? You put the 1 first? Why is that? You're good. So let's say we just leave this as x, and we put our 4 right up here. We would have 4x squared to start out, so we'd be good there. Plus 3x. Plus 4x. Plus 3. So we would have 7x in the middle. So we're still short. No, because you'll start to catch on and see some tricks as you go. So just by some guessing and checking, we see that the 4 would have to be first. Now 4x times x would give us 4x squared. 4x times 3, 12x plus x plus 3. 12x plus x would just give us that 13x down here. Does that seem overwhelming or doable? Typically, we won't have to guess and check as much as we did there. And you'll see how in this next example. So don't freak out yet. Stick with me. Look at this next example. We start out with our parentheses. We know that we have to have two numbers that are multiplied together to give us 2. When we add them together, they have to give us -7. Now this time our a value is 3. So the only way that we can break down the number 3 would be with 3 and 1. So it doesn't matter if I want to put 3x here and x here, or put it the other way around, but we can't break down 3 like we could with 4. So there's not as much guessing and checking there. Now if we have to get a +2 for our c value and a -7 for our b value, do you think that we're going to go with +2 times +1 or -2 times -1 to get that c value? Are you following with me? We need -7 in the middle. two numbers both going to be positive, both going to be negative? What do we think? Well, I like the way you're thinking. If we had one positive, one negative, then when we multiply them together, we would get a negative 2 right here. So we couldn't have one positive and one negative. They both either need to be positive or both need to be negative. They're both going to need to be negative, yeah, because we have a negative c value. Or we have a higher negative c value. Now, if we FOIL out, we have 3x times x will give me 3x squared, 3x times negative 1, 2 times x, and negative 2 times negative 1. So in the middle we would have negative 5. So that wouldn't be quite big enough. What could we do to make it so that that b value would be larger? How could we rearrange things? No idea? Is there anything we can switch around? 2 and 1 we can switch, yeah. Because now we have, instead of earlier we had 3 times 1 here. Now if we have 3 times 2, we're going to get a bigger value that is along with x there. So we have 3x times x, this is 3x squared, 3x times negative 2, gives us negative 6, negative 1 times x, and now we would get negative 7 as our c value. So for that one, we just had to guess and check with the order of our negative 1 and negative 2. Would you like to see a couple more examples, or do you think we're ready to try? I'll go over one more example. We have a 2x squared to start out, so we can't break 2 down anymore. So we know that it has to be a 2x times x. Now we have plus 5 on the end. So our factors of 5 are just 1 and 5. We have it's plus 5, and then we have plus 11 here in the middle, so I'm thinking we're going to go positive with positive. Now if we know 1 and 5 are the factors we're going to use, do you think we would put 1 first or the 5 first? Why do you think we're putting the 1 first, Maya?
Because when we multiply the 2x, we want the bigger number.
Yeah, exactly. We have 11x in the middle, so we need to try to get a larger number that is along with x. So if we put 1 first, 5 on the end, we'll be multiplying 2x times 5 when we FOIL it back out. So we can see this. We have 2x times x, which gives 2x squared, 10x, x, and 5x. So we would get that 11x in the middle. So it's not a total blind guess and check. I mean, once we get the hang of these, we'll start to see that, based on what that middle value is, that b value, we'll start to see, all right, do we want the larger numbers to be multiplied by each other? Do we need to keep it a little bit smaller? So we need the smaller numbers to be multiplied by each other. And it's not just try every single combination until we get the right one. You have a logical idea behind it. So here, first set of practice problems, then we have one more example, and then 2 more practice problems. So why don't you, don't worry about this one. Why don't you take about a minute to do, yeah, Michael? After I finish going through everything.
Yes.
need a negative 7 in the middle. So we're probably going to have to do negative factors of 5, like negative 1 times negative 5. Yep, and then can you break 2 down? Nope, so you know what, you're going to have 2x and an x, right? About 30 more seconds. You get these done, Mackenzie?
Yep.
Can I see? Did you work on it? All right, let's give it a try. We know for sure we can't break that 2 down anymore, right? The only things we can multiply together to get 2 are 2 times 1. So we should know without a doubt that we can start with this. Now the only way to get positive 5 on the end is to multiply either 5 times 1 or negative 5 times negative 1. Since we have a negative 7 in the middle, we probably can guess that we're going to have the negative times the negative. Actually, not guess. It has to be a negative times a negative. There's no way to generate a negative otherwise. So now the only thing you're deciding is if we put our 1 first and 5 second, or 5 and then 1 here. So that's what I will let you decide. All right, last example. And the only reason that this is on a separate slide or different, different from all the other ones is because we have 2 negatives in the middle. So it doesn't change our process to have a couple negatives in there. It just makes it a little bit more tricky. Make sure you have your mask over your nose. Otherwise, they're sending people to the office. That's the second warning. So otherwise, that's what we'll have to do. We start out with our parentheses. The only way to get 2x squared is to have 2x times x. The reason our first example, if we go back to it, this first example, the reason that was a little bit more complicated, it probably wasn't a great one to start out with. The reason it was a little bit more complicated is because we could have gotten 4x squared by doing 4x times x, or by doing 2x times 2x, right? We had to decide what was going on up here first. So there were a lot more options to do. Now with all the rest of them that we've looked at, we've had either like 2 or 3 x squared right here. So there's no way to split it up. We know that it has to be 2x multiplied by x to get that first term. Now the only way that we can get a negative 7 at the end is to have plus and minus in our parentheses. Now it might not be in that order, but that's just how we can start out. The only factors of 7 are 1 and 7. And if this is me, I'm looking at, I need a negative 5 in the middle. Alright? So I don't probably want to put 7 right here because I know I'll be doing 2x times negative 7. So that's going to put me way over to start out. So first I would try having 1 here and 7 right here. Let's see how we do. So we get 2x squared minus 2x plus 7x minus 7. And this will give us 2x plus 5x minus 7. So we're off. How are we off? What? well, we're off by 10 values, but really we're just off by negative, right? We came up with positive 5 here, and we need to have negative 5. So if we're off the negative, why don't we just switch our negative and positive and try again? (2x² plus 2x minus 7x minus 7 gives us 2x² minus 5x minus 7. So that time we were off the negative, so we could just switch our positive and negative sign, the position. All good. Just remember, with a question like this, it also would be correct if you had x plus 1, 2x minus 7. Like the order that those binomials are in doesn't make a difference. You still will come up with the correct answer. But we would need to have a positive 1 and a negative 7 for the second term for those two binomials. Alright, here are the last two practice problems. And then show those to me. We can get started on the the assignment. Yeah.
So since we can break 6 down, do I break it up here and here? Or do I just write 6x and then?
Nope, you have to break it up in those two spots. You have to see how it's